So what's up everybody? Welcome back to the poker vlog Run Good Play Better. If this is your first time watching, my name is Austin Moore, and if it's your second or third or fourth time watching, I really appreciate you staying tuned on the content. So this is episode 9 and it takes place at Lake Elsinore Casino. I had tried to go to Morongo and finally got the okay to record, but when I pulled out my camera I realized that I left my SD card at home, so that kind of put a break on the day for me. It was a really fun session with a lot of swings up and down. I think I got aces cracked like twice. And yeah, it was really just a crazy session. It would have been really good for content, but just life didn't work out that way. Luckily, I bought a second SD card that I'm always just going to keep with my camera no matter what. So hopefully we should never have that issue again. But going forward into the video, typically I like to do a personal aspect of my life in these vlogs, but life's just been challenging. It's been kind of crazy for me, and I haven't really had time to do a lot with my friends or kind of record anything. So I'm kind of just going to go straight into the video with this one. I hope you guys aren't missing that aspect of the vlog too much, and I hope you guys like the content. Let's get into it. In the very first hand that I look down at, I see ace jack offsuit from the under the gun position. I make a raise to $15, and the under the gun +1 player pretty quickly makes a raise to 40. Everybody else folds and the action comes back to me, and I don't think there's much to do here other than just make the call. I don't love it being out of position, but I'm getting a good price, and ace jack offsuit is a pretty strong hand. So I make the call and we go heads up to a flop, which comes out pretty well for me as it comes jack 5-6 rainbow. I'm going to check it over to him and let him continue his aggression, and he bets out for $35 here. I think that a raise here would be a good option, but I was a little bit excited and just decided to flick in a chip for all in here. My opponent pretty much snap folds, so I think I might have missed out on some value from a hand like ace king or ace queen that would have continued betting, especially if we both ended up hitting an ace. It would have been very good for me. But in that moment exactly, I really thought that my opponent would call the all in, seeing as he only had about $120 left in his stack anyways. But he does not, and I'm just going to go ahead and take down a profit of $80 in this first hand. So in this next hand, I see the under the gun +1 player limp in. The low jack player makes a raise to $13, and I look down at jack 9 suited in the cutoff position. I think it's a pretty easy place to just make a call. This hand is going to play pretty well multi-way, and I have position over the two players in this hand so far. But next thing you know, the player on the button goes all in for $28. The under the gun +1 player calls, and so does the low jack. I think a raise would look pretty suspicious at this point, so I just go ahead and flap the raise, and we head to a flop 4 ways with two players with money behind. And once again, I feel pretty good about the flop as it comes out. 10-9-3 with two spades. I have middle pair, a flush draw, and a backdoor straight draw. So when the action checks over to me, I want to get some more money into this pot for value. I make a bet of $50 here. If somebody has a 10, I'm really not in that bad of shape against them unless they have a hand like jack 10. But I'm not really too worried about a hand like that at this point. I think one of these players would have bet top pair. The player in the under the gun +1 position goes ahead and makes the call at this point, and we head to a turn. The turn comes out as the 4 of hearts, and again the under the gun +1 player checks it over to me. I really don't think he's going to have a 10 at this point. I think he's going to have some kind of a hand like an overpair. And he doesn't have much left in his stack, so I just go ahead and put him all in. He folds out pretty quickly. I show the jack 9 for a second pair. And the player on the button who moved all in pre-flop goes ahead and shows ace 3 of clubs. He ended up making a pair, but it wasn't good enough to beat my 9, and I'm going to take down this pot now. I make a profit of $139 in this hand and feel pretty good about how this session's going so far. In one of my previous episodes, I make a comment about limping under the gun that you should always raise or fold. So when I look down at 6-7 of hearts under the gun, I make a raise here to $12. The action folds around to the big blind who decides to make the call. We're going to go heads up to a flop now with a pretty small pot. It's a small pot, but it's worth fighting for, especially when the flop comes out king 5-8 with two spades and a heart. I'm open-ended, I have a backdoor flush draw, and can easily rep a king here. So when the big blind checks it over to me, I make a bet of $15. The big blind ends up making the call here. After checking and calling, I think he's going to have a weak hand, maybe ace high, maybe a 5 or an 8, but definitely not putting him on a king. The 8 of diamonds comes on the turn, and the big blind checks over to me again pretty quickly. I don't think he has an 8, but this card is a lot better for him, so I just check it back to him. And the 8 of clubs comes on the river. And when my opponent checks it over to me a third time, I definitely don't think he has a strong hand at all. But I'm not going to win with 7 high, so I make a bet of $25, and my opponent makes a fold pretty quickly. I think it's likely he just had a flush draw, maybe an ace high hand, or maybe even a similar straight draw to mine. But either way, I needed to bet to win this pot. I make a profit of $30 and move on to the next hand. After the last hand, I get a little bit card dead, can't really make any strong hands for a while. I pick up pocket fours 3 times in one rotation. The first time I can't really make anything happen. The second time I commit the cardinal sin of limping in and really just end up folding both of them. By the third time I pick up pocket fours, I really want to play a hand. I see a raise from the under the gun +1 player to $16. The small blind player goes ahead and makes the call here, and I think this is going to be a pretty easy call from the big blind. So I make the call, and we go 3 ways to a flop, which comes out 6-3-10 rainbow. The small blind checks it over to me, and I want to take a stab at this pot, so I decide to make a bet of $20. It's a pretty good board for my range, calling from the big blind, and if a 5, a deuce, or a 7 comes out, I'm going to have straight outs. I can also hit a set on the turn. So I make a bet of $20. The under the gun +1 player calls, and the small blind player just ends up getting out of the way. The 5 of spades comes on the turn, and it's exactly what I was hoping for. I've already got plans to check raise in my mind, so I check it over to my opponent pretty quickly, and he falls for the bait and ends up putting out a bet of $45 here. When I raise, I don't want to make it look too big like I'm trying to push him out of the pot. It's really not a scary board, and it's easy for me to have a set or two pair kind of a hand. So I make a raise to $115. I think this is a good sizing to where it looks like I'm just going to set up a river shove. I think my opponent realizes this and really just doesn't seem happy about it. He ends up just folding his cards, and I'm going to take down this pot. I show the bluff here to let the table know that I don't always have the cards when I make big bets. I'm hoping that this will influence someone to pay me off when I do make a big hand on later streets. But for the time being, I make a profit of $97 and a mental win because I finally take down a nice sized pot with pocket fours after trying 3 times. So in this next hand, I see the middle position player raise to $16. The player in the small blind goes ahead and makes the call here. And I look down at ace queen offsuit in the big blind and make a raise to $62. The middle position player calls pretty quickly, and the player in the small blind also goes ahead and calls. He doesn't look super thrilled about it, but I think he's getting a really good price to call once the middle position player also makes the call. So he makes a call, and we're going to go 3 ways to a flop in a pretty bloated already pot. The flop doesn't really bring much help to my hand specifically, but if I did have a hand like aces, kings, or queens, this would be a good flop for me. It comes 8-4-5 rainbow. So I just make a small continuation bet. I don't think there's any need to make a large bet to try and push anybody out. I think it's a good time to just make it look like I'm going for value. The middle position player makes the call here for $45. And the small blind, who is pretty short stacked to start the hand, thinks it over. He had about $130 to start the hand, so really only about 70 left. But he ends up just folding here. I think he's respecting my bet and thinking that I have some kind of a hand like aces, kings, or queens. The deuce of spades comes out on the turn, which brings a flush draw. I have a gut shot to the wheel with ace high, and I think it's going to be a good time to put out a large bet to try and push out any hands that might have picked up a draw. I don't have any spades in my hand, so it's likely my opponent does. I make a bet of $120 here, and the middle position player goes ahead and makes the call. The 10 of clubs comes out on the river, and the middle position player doesn't have much left, but I'm continuing the story that I have a strong hands. I put him all in for his remaining about $100, and he just folds pretty quickly. I show ace queen, and the opponent in middle position actually says that I was ahead the whole time. He doesn't say what he had, but I think it's likely he had a hand like king queen or maybe ace jack of spades. He really would not tell me much about the strength of his hand or what he actually had, but he did say that I was ahead the whole time. So I get pretty lucky to not get called by some kind of a pocket pair here and take down a $289 profit. So in the next hand, the under the gun player limps in for $3, and the player in the small blind makes a raise to $20. Normally, with only 3 people in the pot, the dealer will give you guys the option to chop the pot and not have to play for only $3 after the drop. But the small blind doesn't even consider asking about this. He just makes a raise, which tells me he's going to have a pretty strong hand. I look down at ace king suited and feel like my hand is going to be better a lot of the time though. So I make a raise to $60, and the player in the small blind is actually my buddy Manny. He showed up in one of my previous vlogs. He's a real cool dude, very fun to play with. And once the under the gun player folds, he goes ahead and tells me, I can't fold this. I got to go all in. I say, no worries, man. I'm going to call. He shows over pocket queens. I show him my ace king, and it's a classic flip. The board comes out 4, 5, 8, queen with a 10 of spades on the river, and he's going to win this one with the set of queens. Pretty much had me dead on the turn, but that's just poker. Sometimes you're going to win these and sometimes you're going to lose. This hand takes a chunk out of my stack, but at the end of the day, it's very hard to get away from ace king suited. And it really doesn't hurt too bad because at least I'm doubling up a buddy, and it's really not that much that we ended up playing for anyways. Only $125 in this hand. So I take a loss here. Luckily it's going to a buddy, and the player under the gun actually says that he would have made a flush on the river, so I'm glad I could at least give him some protection by raising. So in this next hand, I'm in the cutoff position. I see the low jack player limp in. I see the hijack player limp in. And I look down at pocket kings from the cutoff position. This is a pretty good starting hand if you ask me. So I make a raise to $20. And the player in the big blind makes the call. The player in the low jack also goes ahead and makes the call. And the player in the hijack goes ahead and makes the call as well. How could you possibly fold with such good value? So we had 4 ways to a flop, which comes very nice for me. It comes king 10-5 with 2 hearts. And the action checks over to me pretty fast. I definitely want to charge anybody that's going to have a straight draw or flush draw on this board. So I make a pretty large bet of $55 here. Not really giving anybody a great price. And I want to kind of make it look like I'm just bluffing, trying to win this pot just now after everybody checks to me. But it doesn't really work. The player in the big blind folds, the player in the low jack folds, and the player in the hijack, who's my buddy Manny from the last hand, he thinks about it. He looks like he really wants to call, and I tell him, you're probably behind. You should probably just fold, but it's up to you. And he goes ahead and listens to my advice. He makes the fold. I show pocket kings for top set, and he goes ahead and tells me that he folded 10-5 for bottom 2 pair, which is a little bit sucky because he basically was drawing dead, and I definitely could have stacked him and got my money back from the last ace king hand. But that's alright. I make a profit of $62 in this hand and don't make one of my friends mad at me. So we'll move on to the next hand now. So in this next hand, I'm pretty deep stacked at this point, so I decide to throw out a straddle, and I get instantly rewarded when I look down at king queen offsuit. The player in middle position goes ahead and calls the straddle here, and the player on the button also goes ahead and makes the call. The action folds back around to me, and I definitely want to raise it up here, get some more money in this pot. So I put in an extra $14 to make it $20 to go. The middle position player calls, the player on the button calls, and we're going to go 3 ways to the flop now. The flop comes out and doesn't bring me much help. It's 10-10-3, but I think if I had any kind of a pocket pair, I would definitely continue on this board. And given that my hand was a straddle, it's likely that I could have a 10, as I really could have anything. So I make a bet of $30, hoping to just win the pot right now. And that happens for me when both the player in the middle position and the button fold. So I make a profit of $45 in this hand and decide it's pretty much time to go. I've played a lot and have a pretty good sized stack, so I rack up and get on out of there. What's up again, everybody? I played the majority of this session with my buddy Manny. He was the guy who had doubled up with my ace king hand. It stung a little bit, but overall I had a pretty good session. I bought in for $300 in total and cashed out for $800. I played probably like 4 hours, I think, during this session, and just decided to leave once Manny left. I was having a lot of fun talking with him and playing with him, and kind of just didn't want the game to go stale for myself. And I had a good profit on the day already, so I just figured it was time to rack up. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I tried to get out to Morongo and get some different action at different casinos for you guys, but failed epically. So once I get this video uploaded, it's kind of my plan to try and head out over there to get some content for you guys. I hope you guys are excited for that, and I hope you guys like this episode. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's really going to help the channel grow and help me kind of feel inspired to keep on going with it. So I appreciate you guys watching this far, and I'll talk to you guys later.